Hello and welcome to the big picture. The much delayed and much debated and deciphered Goods and Services Tax Bill seems set to be finally seeing the light of the day. The bill, which was passed in Lok Sabha in May 2015, has been pending in the Rajya Sabha for the last 1 year following objections to certain provisions in it, mainly from the Congress. The government finally seems to have worked out a compromise after some give and take. The Constitution Amendment Bill to enable the implementation of the GST, which will replace a spate of existing taxes, is set to be moved in the Rajya Sabha tomorrow and is likely to be passed. This legislation is considered one of the biggest financial sector reforms. Incidentally, it was UPA 1 which had originally mooted the idea of GST in 2006, and a Constitution Amendment Bill was introduced in the Lok Sabha in March 2011. However, due to opposition from then opposition party, the BJP, and its state governments, the bill lapsed. Now with the bill finally poised to become a law, what are the implications of it? How will it change the taxation system in the country, and what are the benefits and problems, if any? We will discuss all this today with an eminent panel of guests: CM Vasudev, former Finance Secretary, Government of India; Professor Arun Kumar, economist and retired professor at the JNU; Ajay Dua, former Secretary, Ministry of Industry and Commerce, Government of India. Welcome to all of you. Mr. Vasudev, you think that finally, all the problems have been resolved? You think that this is a bill which can now be passed without too much of worry?
Well, I would say this is just the beginning of the process at this stage. The bill which is currently pending before the Rajya Sabha is the Constitution Amendment Bill,
right,
which is really enabling the central parliament to legislate on state taxes, and similarly the state legislatures will be empowered to legislate on the central taxes. So this is a very basic constitution amendment, because our constitution lays down the powers of the center and the states with regard to the taxes that they can levy. So once this constitution amendment bill is passed, it will clear the way for enacting a law which will put in place the GST, which is the combination of the central and the state taxes. So, of course, it is a reflection of the fractured nature of our politics that it has taken so long to cross the first hurdle. Because this is a constitution amendment bill, therefore two-thirds majority is required, therefore opposition parties have greater political leverage in trying to put pressure on various provisions that will come into the law. But I think there are many areas which are still subject to a lot of political differences once the new law is framed by the government, after the Constitution Amendment Bill is passed by the Parliament, and it is also passed by 50% of the state legislatures. Then the centre will be empowered to frame a law for the GST, which will combine the central taxes and the state taxes. So I think we still have quite some way to go. There are critical issues with regard to administration of the GST, whether the assessment powers will be with the central government or the state governments. That is where a lot of political power and patronage lies. And there is going to be a lot of jostling at that stage because the state governments will be loath to give up the political power and administrative power which comes with the administration of the state taxes. The suggestions that up to 1.5 crore or so taxpayers should be with the state government, and more than that the central government. These are going to be very messy if such type of a compromise or patchwork agreement is reached.
Okay.
But let us see what happens.
Okay.
Second major problem that is going to...
Sir, we'll come to the... I'll come back to you. First, so, Mr. Dua, it was said that one of the major things why this got delayed so much was because the Congress insisting that this cap be introduced in the Constitution Amendment Bill. Now they seem to have withdrawn that point which they were making. So you think that is the right thing which has happened now? Having a cap in the Constitution Amendment Bill, was it the right thing or not the right thing?
I don't think it was required. as has been said repeatedly over the last several months, the Constitution does not, with respect to any levy, lay down what the limits of it should be. This is a power delegated by the Constitution, given, I wouldn't use the word delegated, entrusted to the executive of the state, executive of the centre. And for levy of the taxes, they need a parliamentary or the legislative approval. So putting it in constitutional amendment would have been, I think, setting up a wrong precedent. And to that extent, I think the Congress, having been convinced...
No, but why do you think, why was this demand made in the first place?
A very good question. I would not say it was done entirely for politics.
Exactly.
Reason being, if you would recall, the GST Empowered Committee of State Ministers, they had asked for suggestions about the rate from the NIPFP, the National Institute of Public Finance and Policy. And what had the NIPFP suggested? 27% could be the rate for it. That itself was found to be self-defeating, because it would have not reduced the burden of taxation, but probably enhanced it.
Enhanced it.
So it wasn't, and then we had the Ministry of Finance doing an internal exercise with the Chief Economic Advisor being interested in the responsibility. He comes up with a suggestion that 15 or 15.5% will do. So here is such a wide gap between 15.5 and 27% that I guess the opposition, and in this case led by the Congress, which may have had certainly some political reasons for it, but there was enough ground being given to it to say that if the variation can be so much, then the benefit which had been envisaged when it had conceived the bill in 2006 or conceived the tax in 2006 and introduced the legislation in 2011 was to rationalize taxes,
exactly,
reduce taxes and turn the country into a common market by taking away the cascading effect of every subsequent tax. So to that extent, I would not entirely say it was political, but it was a mixture of the two. And I think the solution which has been found, that we will ring fences.
What is exactly this ring fencing?
Yes. Yeah.
What is this ring fencing which is being talked about?
We have to understand why this tax rate is being talked about. There's something called the revenue neutral rate.
Right.
The revenue neutral rate means that what tax you were collecting earlier, you will collect the same under the new scheme of things. Now, the question is
what tax you are collecting under various different taxes.
Yes.
You will collect the same thing in
amount
one
of
tax
in the under the GST.
Right.
Okay. So that's why it's called revenue neutral rate. How do you calculate the revenue neutral rate? You need to know what is the base which you will be taxing. So we know that in agriculture there will be no taxation, so you remove agriculture from GDP. Bulk of the unorganized sectors out of it. Then many of the important commodities like petroleum goods, like your liquor, like your cigarettes, they'll be outside this, though the sin commodities. So therefore the balance is what you'll be collecting the tax from. So roughly our indirect tax base is about 10% of the GDP, right? So you have to continue to collect 10% under the new GST, what you are collecting from sales tax, excise duty, service tax, other such minor duties like countervailing duties. So you will collect all that minus the customs duty. Now, if you were to do that, then the calculation has to be made. And that is where my own suspicion is that 12 to 13% may be adequate rather than even 15 or 18%. Because
18 is what is being talked about.
18 is what is being talked about is the upper limit. But, the chief economic
advisor... The states will have the flexibility to, below 18%.
One does not know how will the bill be actually drafted.
Also, there'll be basic rate and there'll be one above rate and one lower rate, etc. So it's a very complicated exercise. That's what brings me to the main question about GST. GST is not a simple exercise. GST combines your indirect taxes and value-added tax together. So everything will be under value-added tax, and you'd already moved for sales tax as value-added tax, excise duty as value-added tax, services tax, but now you're combining them together.
Right.
This is also a very complex exercise. And here is where the problem of the small-scale sector arises, because the small-scale sector is unable to deal with this complexity because you require massive computerization to do that. So all those who are below 1 crore, they are going to suffer because they buy locally and sell locally. The GST will benefit the large-scale sector. But that will mean that the small-scale sector will be at a discount, and therefore the small scale sector production could
Sir,
be
we will-
hit, employment could be hit.
Sir, I think this is a completely different what you raised.
But I'm saying this is important to realize
Absolutely.
in the context of
I mean,
GST.
This is an important point you raised. But we are now joined in by A.K. Bhattacharya, Editorial Director of the Business Standard. Welcome, Mr. Bhattacharya. Mr. Bhattacharya, the question is that there seems to have been some kind of a give and take which has happened, and the government has come out with, has compromised, has come, both all sides have compromised, and the bill is now, the constitutional amendment bill is ready, and it's going to be taken up tomorrow in the Rajya Sabha. Are you satisfied with the way it has worked? It has been worked out so far.
Well, I am not satisfied the way it has worked so far, but at the end of the day, one has to realize that perhaps an imperfect GST is better than a perfect GST, because if you are chasing a perfect GST, probably this century also will not be will be a realizable target. So therefore, I think what has been worked out to me is a workable thing with all the imperfections of a GST regime. You have overcome the primary concerns of this 1% of manufacturing states tax, which was going to be very negative, would have a negative impact on the entire exercise of GST. I think that has been overcome.
Yes.
You also have overcome this demand which came that there must be a cap, a rate should be put in the constitutional amendment bill, which would have been politically a very difficult task, because if you do not, if you put that overall cap rate in the constitutional amendment bill, then every time you want to make a change, you have to go back to Parliament, Rajya Sabha, Lok Sabha, 2/3 majority in the Rajya Sabha, 2/3 majority in the Lok Sabha, and then you 50% of the states to approve it. So it is a sense has prevailed that the rate should be actually mentioned in the GST bill, which is like a finance bill,
right,
which can be changed and it will be a money bill. So politically it will not be a major hurdle in my view. So yes, there are many issues. For example, you have the question of what would be the rates, what would be the items that should be excluded. For example, my belief, my understanding is that the larger the number of exclusions, then the higher will be the revenue neutral rate.
Mr. Bhattacharya, but these questions of what should be included, what should be excluded, they will all come later when the actual GST legislation is brought in, or is it going to come in the constitutional amendment bill?
No, I don't think they will come in this bill, because they are, as you rightly said, they are subsequent issues. There are many other issues that will going to come up. There is a question of dispute resolution mechanism. You have a question about how the GST, the state GST and the central GST will work. How will the GST network, which is the
interstate network,
the way the taxes will be collected? There's a big dispute going on right now between the state government's excise and revenue department and the central revenue department. Central revenue department is saying that it wants to have access to all companies, even though they are less than 1.5 crore turnover, because they don't want to lose their jurisdiction. Similarly, the state is saying, no, I want to have control over it. So all these issues will be as contentious, as problematic, as dispute-oriented. So I think we are going to see many more months of dispute, controversy. But broadly, the amendment bill, it seems to me, if it is out of our way, then the framework can be rolled out probably from next year.
From next year. Okay, Mr. Vasudev. Mr. Vasudev, this dispute resolution mechanism, which was also another point of dispute before, which they seem to have worked out now. What is it that you think should be this mechanism? Because this mechanism initially, with the High Court judge was supposed to head it, which was what was recommended or demanded, and now it's out of that. What kind of a resolution mechanism will we be seeing, you think?
Well, I think it's a good thing that after all this dispute resolution mechanism is going to deal with various issues that will arise with implementation of the GST law, and it is very much an executive function and involving the judge of the High Court perhaps was not a very good idea from the beginning, and it is good that all parties have come around that. And the GST resolution mechanism has to have the states and the center together on board. And the states' insistence that the majority of the states must be on board before any recommendation comes out of the GST resolution mechanism. I think that is going to be an important aspect. It is again something which is perhaps not going to be spelt out in the constitutional amendment bill. It will again form part of the main GST law. But dispute resolution mechanism is one of the easier problems, I think, to resolve. The bigger problem, some of those which Mr. Bhattacharya has alluded to, and also many other problems like the exemption to the small scale sector for 1.5 crore and above for certain products, then states like Uttarakhand and all where there is a total exemption as a tool for development which the government has been using the tax policy for that purpose. How they are going to be resolved, I think they are complex issues, and the political overtones are going to be immense, as also the difficulty with regard to the administration and assessment of the tax, which agency is going to be responsible for that, the central government or the state government. So there are a host, I think, of issues which the bill, when it is framed and it is circulated for comments, which will have to address. And above all, I think the technology backbone, which is really going to be the backbone of the implementation. There is going to be a need for a lot of training of the staff, both the central and the state, for implementation. Of course, I am told through the NSDL, the National Securities Depository, they have done a pilot program and it has been tested and it has come out very well. But there are a lot of complexities in the technology backbone which is going to be used for implementation of this law.
Okay.
So a lot of training of the staff will be needed.
Okay, Mr.
So
Dua?
I think it is a good thing that we are now at that stage where the...
Okay, sir. Mr. Dua, will there be a need for change in the entire architecture of the way the tax collection system itself?
I think so. But before I answer that, pardon my saying that, we should not be in a hurry now that once the constitutional amendment is passed, that means tomorrow or the day after in the Rajya Sabha and then later by a majority of the states, to try and implement the GST arrangement very quickly, because there is a danger that any imperfect drafting can lead to intervention by judicial intervention and the whole process could be struck down. We have 3 legislations, just to recapitulate, which will follow the constitutional amendment. One, the national
national GST.
One is called the national, the other is state, the third is integrated. And all these legislations must learn or go by how the courts have in the past interpreted ruling given. For instance,
to avoid litigations in future.
Just to give you an example, on goods, so far the goods were within the purview of a particular body. Services were within the purview of the center. The courts over the years have created a new category called deemed goods. Now, deemed goods also have been given to the states. So there are, and then there will be...
All these things need to be completely reoriented, reworked.
Absolutely. We have to look at these 60 years of the rulings of the apex courts, high courts, how they have changed, defined these things, and then incorporate them here. That's one. Second, I think the issues of implementing the laws, once they've been framed,
put in place,
probably even judicially tested, the arrangements which have to be looked at are so many. If we talk about 1.5 crores is within the threshold limit for the states. The states are saying we want not only to assess but also to scrutinize, adjudicate, etc. Then the rulings given on these matters in one state cannot be, or at least should not be, at great variance from what a similar ruling in another state is, or what the central government tax department person will give a ruling on the subject. Otherwise, you would not have a common market. On each issue, you could have a variation in the
from
subject.
from what you are saying, from what all of you are saying, it is just the first initial baby
Absolutely.
step which will be taken with the passing of this Constitutional Amendment Bill, and there's a whole lot of things which may take a whole lot of time.
And there are many unanticipated things, and that's why you see, if you go into the history of implementation of VAT, which is what actually this is, then first in 1978 the Indirect Tax Committee report had proposed that, but they said we cannot implement it because there's a large amount of small scale sector where it's impossible to do this. So they suggested man VAT, which is manufacturing value added tax. But even that could not be implemented because large amount of the manufacturing is from taking inputs from the small scale sector, supplying to small scale sector, etc. So then it was suggested as mod VAT under the long term fiscal policy in 1986. And even mod VAT said we will begin with the large scale sector and then slowly spread it. And then we had Sen VAT and then we had VAT. So the implementation is very difficult, and wherever in the world it has been implemented, whether Australia or other countries, it has been found to be very, very difficult. And that's where the real difficulties will arise, that what kind of software is there. And in India, because we don't have one single GST, we have the central GST and the state GST, and the large scale manufacturers
and the interstate GST.
That they, apparently they will give up in some form or the other, because the Congress has been asking that that be given up, the IGST. But the point is that suppose you are a large scale manufacturer selling in 25 different states, so you have to register in 25 different states. So therefore the complexity of that itself, even though some kind of taxes will be on one platform, but this registration in 25 different states and then supplying there and then setting off the CGST against CGST, and where the states are collecting it, how will that adjustment take place with the center, and the center is collecting in lieu of the excise duty, then how will that adjustment take place with the states? This is all going to be a very, very complex task, and that's why I think we have to go slow on the implementation of this.
Mr. Bhattacharya, you know, considering the complications which are there, considering the nature of the new tax which will come in, and the nature of trying to implement it, how is it that we were being told that it would be GST would be implemented from this year, from 2016, from April 1, 2016?
I'm not overduly overawed by the complexity of a GST structure, and I've seen our tax systems, tax administration machinery over the last many years, and I don't think they will find it extremely difficult to take on a new challenge like this. Yes, there will be difficult moments.
We have two very important, sorry to intervene, sir.
Yeah.
We have two secretaries of the government of India who have dealt with this, who think that it is going to be quite complicated.
No, let me complete.
Yeah.
My point is that
I'll come to you, sir, Mr. Vasudev.
my point is, it is going to be a challenging task, but that doesn't mean that we cannot roll it out by April 2017. I'll tell you the simple reason is this, that once the tax structure and the entire legislative framework is out in the public domain, there will be an implicit incentive in the system to be part of the system, because if you are not, then you are not in the value chain. So, there is this concern about small scale industries, concern
Exactly.
is there, but I do believe that if the small scale sector can be incentivized to be part of the value chain, because this is a system which will actually bring a large number of economic entities which are outside the pale of taxation into the taxation network. So I think a net, it will be a kind of a gain for everybody in the system. Yes, there will be difficulties, but I don't see any problem in rolling out. Even the GST technology backbone, I'm told, is ready to be rolled out by end of September. They need to have a 5-month testing period, and I think we have a 6-month time after September. So I don't see any reason why there should be a delay. The only concern, the real cause for delay would be political, because the moment you roll out GST, there's bound to be impact on the price line, inflation. So therefore, the government may be slightly, hesitant in rolling it out from next year, because you have some important elections coming away. So it is not economic administrative reasons, but it is political reasons which will come in the way.
So you're saying that when this is implemented, or it may have an impact on the inflation.
Yes, of course. The prices will are likely to go up in the short run.
Okay. Mr. Vasudev, would you agree with that? One second thing is, do you think it is reasonably, sir, do you think it is reasonably possible to, start implementing it from next year, from 2017?
Yeah, I'll comment on both aspects. I think in the short run, there is going to be certainly an inflationary impact, because the benefit of the taking credit at every stage of value addition, system will have to get used to it. In the service providers, say for example, doctors, today they are paying a service tax for 12%. Now they'll have to pay whatever is the marginal rate, 16% or whatever. They will have to pay that, because they will not be taking credit for various inputs that they are using for the equipment and all that. They will have to get used to it, whether their basic consultation charges will come down or not. This type of thing will be there in host of other items where, people are saying that everybody is going to benefit. The states are going to benefit, the consumer is going to benefit, the center is going to benefit. So if everybody is benefiting, somebody has to lose. Otherwise, you can't have such a win-win situation. And the loser in the system is going to be the person who is using black money or cash for buying at the last point of sale. So that is where the money which is being lost to the state, that will be recovered, and then that will be shared between the center and the states and the consumer and everybody else. So that is one of the major, I think, hidden advantages of the system, that it will reduce avenues for generation and also spending of black money.
Okay.
This aspect of the benefit of the GST system is not being sufficiently highlighted, because that is where the benefit is going to come, and that is what is going to ensure that everybody else, every other stakeholder in the system is going to benefit from it. On the other point, with regard to the
implementation,
rolling it out from the 1st of April 2017, I believe the central government has done sufficient homework in this area. A separate autonomous body has already been created. They have already, I believe, selected a vendor who is going to run the technology backbone. So all that has been done. But the political problems which will probably be raised now by the state governments when they are debating the constitutional amendment bill, or when the new law is going to be framed by the central government, there will be political issues. And how quickly they are able to resolve that political issues will determine whether it can be launched from 1st April 17 or not. But I agree with Mr. Bhattacharya, there is sufficient technical know-how, knowledge, IT backbone has been developed, sufficient homework has been done. From that administrative and technical point of view, probably it can be launched from 1st April.
Okay.
But whether the political problems will be resolved by that date, that remains doubtful.
Okay. Quickly, sir.
I think I share this optimism that it is desirable. We postponed a number of deadlines in the past. It should have been done in 14, 16, 17, etc. It's desirable. All that I was saying is cautioning that we need to keep the past experience in mind, and if the rules and the model law which is to go by, because of which the government has put out, I think some of these lessons have not been incorporated in those.
Okay. Quick last words.
Yeah, I think we have to go into it with caution, because the macroeconomics of it suggests that the output will be affected badly if small scale industries hit badly. That would also affect employment. And as has been already said by the various people, that inflation would be rising because of services sector prices, and federalism will be hit. We are
so on this note, we need to end. But it's very interesting what today's discussion has brought out. We will obviously will be discussing this more in the coming days and weeks when this whole process starts. We'll wait and watch how it will all develop. Thanks to all my guests. Please keep watching. We'll come back with Andhrish, the big picture, same time.